Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ISPCAN webinar. My name's Jane Estes, and I'm the ISPCAN Knowledge and Content Development Manager. Also joining us online today is Holly Malcolm, our ISPCAN Membership and Marketing Manager, and Pragathi Tamala, CEO of ISPCAN. ISPCAN International webinars cover diverse topics, which are presented by subject matter experts from around the globe. These 90-minute webinars are designed to help you gain access to knowledge and expertise to inform care, improve practice, and drive policy change. All this is critical to help improve the outcomes for children globally. I want to tell you about a few upcoming events at ISPCAN. First, we hope you'll join us in beautiful Vilnius, Lithuania, for our International Congress, October 6th through 9th. You'll see the Congress themes on the screen, and they are also available on the ISPCAN website. And we wanted to let you know that the program is now live and registration is open. So again, we hope you'll join us. We also hope you'll visit our ISPCAN Knowledge Hub. The Knowledge Hub is an open access centralized library containing ISPCAN and partner resources. It has our webinars, journal clubs, masterclasses, data-driven global reports, and shared partner and downloadable resources, all open access. And if you have an open access resource that you would like us to share in the ISPCAN Knowledge Hub, please email it to me at partnerships@ispcan.org. And now I'd like to invite Holly Malcolm to tell us about our World Day campaign.
Hello, everyone. My name is Holly Malcolm, and I'm the ISPCAN Global Membership and Marketing Manager. We're so happy to have you here today, and thank you, Zlatina, for doing this webinar for our child protection professionals. On July 7th is a special day. This is where we celebrate all of you, anybody in child protection. It's a day that we honor you, recognize you, and do special things. So this webinar is one of those, just to help you deal with stress and strategies. So anyway, I'll put the link to the campaign on our website in our chat so that you can go in and take a look at it. But enjoy, and thank you for all you do.
Thanks so much, Holly. And now tips for making the most of today's session. Please engage with us. This session is meant to be an active, interactive learning platform. So please participate, share your comments in the chat. Any questions you have, put in the Q&A box throughout the presentation. And at the end, we'll get to your questions at the end of the presentation. Also, to enhance your experience, you may enable closed captioning from your Zoom control bar by choosing Captions. And now please take a moment, introduce yourself to other attendees, our ISPCAN team, and our featured presenter in the chat box. Let us know where you're joining from and your organization and your discipline. And as always for joining us today, a recording of this session, the presentation slides, links to all the featured resources that Zlatina will share with you during the presentation will all be sent to you after the webinar. You'll also receive a certificate of attendance. And today's topic, the cost of caring. Strategies to combat burnout and secondary trauma among professionals working with children. Child-serving professionals have long worked under demanding conditions, often with irregular hours and high emotional stakes environments that are challenging and chronically stressful. The goal of this webinar is to deepen our understanding of secondary traumatic stress and burnout, while offering practical, evidence-informed strategies to support the well-being of professionals working with children across diverse settings. This session will include opportunities for interactive discussions, both through the chat box and the Zoom polling questions. We also have instructor-led experiential self-care practices that you can learn and then apply both in your personal and professional context. The key learning objectives for today's session are to provide an overview of secondary traumatic stress and burnout and explore their physiological and psychological impacts, to recognize the symptoms of burnout and STS, and to share concrete tools for managing and mitigating their effects, and to identify strategies at an individual and an organizational level to prevent burnout and promote resiliency. And now I'm thrilled to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Zlatina Kostova. Zlatina is Director of Training at Lifeline for Kids at the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School. With a strikingly multidisciplinary and multicultural education obtained in Italy, Switzerland, and the US, she has a strong background in clinical psychology, and her main interests lie in childhood trauma and mindfulness-based interventions. Zlatina is an international trainer in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, a mindfulness-based cognitive therapy qualified teacher, and she is also a certified trainer for teaching trauma-informed curricula developed by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Zlatina is actively collaborating and presenting at an international level, and she is a go-to expert in implementing evidence-based treatments for children and youth in several countries, including war-torn zones like Ukraine. And it's my true honor to turn the session over now to Zlatina.
Thank you so much, Jane, of this beautiful introduction, and welcome everybody. I know that people are joining from all over the world, and it's just so inspiring to just read people joining from Zambia and South Africa and Moldova and Portugal. So really welcome everyone. It is an absolute honor to be here again to our annual meeting of the World Day for Child Protection Professionals. And as Jane said, my name is Zlatina Kostova. I'm actually originally from Bulgaria, and my background is in clinical psychology, specialized in evidence-based treatment for childhood trauma. But I've been really very much interested also in the topic of well-being and the topic of self-care, which will be the theme of our meeting today. So thank you so much for joining me. A little bit more about me. As I said, I was born in Bulgaria, but I actually lived in Italy and then graduated in Switzerland and then came here 10 years ago with the idea to stay just a couple of years. But now I'm happily grounded here, but still doing a lot of international work. And so for me, it's really meaningful to stay connected with people all over the world. And I'm sharing this because I believe I do bring this multicultural openness and curiosity. Now, today's webinar will be, usually we join webinars and trainings to specialize and sort of like learn better how can we work with our clients and do better the services that we provide. But really my goal for today is to take actually a moment and reflect on ourselves. So we would like for this webinar to be really a real pause of refreshing yourself, of maybe reflecting on how can you balance better your personal life and your work life, and what can we all do together to feel better. I also want to thank everybody here, including Jane, Holly, and Pragati. And I cannot present this topic in a better team because I've been working now with these amazing people for many years. And talking about self-care and well-being within a team that I respect and admire so much, it's only helpful. So I'm really glad that I'm here and doing this with all of you. Okay, so I will start sharing my slides. And I know we have an hour and 20 minutes from now on. I hope that everybody can see the slides. Unfortunately, I can't see you, of course. But another thing that I wanted to say is that I really hope that this could be a conversation and not just me talking to you, because you are the expert of your life and your work and yourself. And so I'm really hoping that this could be more of a dialogue. There will be several moments. We try to make this webinar more interactive so that we all stay engaged. So I strongly invite people to write in the chat or use any ways that we can stay engaged. And I see those little hearts and thumbs up on my screen, so thank you. And we will do some poll questions. We will do also some sort of Padlet boards where we will answer some questions. But I'm really hoping, again, to make this more as a dialogue and as a two-side learning, because I will be the one learning from you and your work settings and what can really work in terms of self-care and well-being. Jane will be also helping me with the chat in case I am missing something, but I'm still seeing people joining from really all over the world. So again, welcome everyone. Now, we can't really start talking about self-care and well-being without acknowledging the current context. And again, we're here joining from literally all over the world. And I just want to acknowledge that many people right now are dealing with so many global health challenges and economic uncertainty. Many of us are working in settings where there has been a lot of cuts in funding, job insecurity, job termination, displacement, right? So there is so much going on right now in the world. And when we also add on this, our personal experiences, right? Some of you might be living in countries with an ongoing war, so you might be directly exposed to human suffering. We also live with the stories of our clients, and so our levels of secondary trauma are much higher. And we also have, again, our own lives with our own personal losses and challenges, right? And so this context can be really big and bring even more of those challenges of burnout and secondary traumatic stress. So I just wanted to acknowledge the times that we're living in and that there is a universal ongoing sort of challenge around the world that in different ways we're all experiencing. And because we promised you that this will be experiential learning as well, I actually want to start right away with the practice of mindfulness. And Jane already mentioned I'm a certified teacher in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And this is one of the practices from MBCT, that it's one of the most practical and most utilized by people who are going through mindfulness training. It's called the 3 minutes breathing space, and it's like an hourglass. There are 3 steps of this practice. So we'll start with step 1, where we will open our awareness to whatever experience is here for us. Then we will narrow our attention to the breath, and then we will expand again our awareness, including the body as a whole. You don't have to follow this practice or my voice. You have complete freedom to choose any object of attention, but the goal of this practice is simply to ground ourselves before we start this webinar, because most of us have been running around our days or maybe just starting our days. So it might be good to start right away with something that we can use in our days to ground ourselves. So I would invite you to take a comfortable position, whether you're sitting or standing up. And we will purposefully change the posture of our bodies, bringing our back straight but not stiff, slightly opening the shoulders and then gently dropping them down. And then aligning our neck with our back. And if that feels comfortable for you, allowing your eyes to close or lower your gaze so that you minimize distractions. And with this posture, we want to signal a sense of presence, a sense of dignity. And now in step 1 of this practice, I would invite you to simply be aware of what are you experiencing right now, what it is here for you right now. You may want to notice what thoughts are running through your mind. There's no need to get caught up into the content of our thoughts, but we may simply say to ourselves, analyzing or thinking about the future. And if that's helpful, you can imagine thoughts being like clouds in the sky that are coming, staying for a while, and then leaving. And then I would invite you to bring your attention to your emotions and just recognize what emotions are here for you right now. And if you care, you can tell yourself, sadness is here, or joy is here, or anxiety is here. And again, we don't want to push any emotions away, but we actually want to befriend those emotions, open up, and make space for whatever it's here right now to be here. And sooner or later, your mind might be distracted by other thoughts or sounds. And this is completely normal. This is what our minds do. Just see if you can invite your mind back kindly. And explore now what physical sensations are here for you right now. Any sensations of pain or stiffness? And if so, see if you can bring your attention right into those sensations. Maybe breathing in and out of them. And then in step 2 of this exercise, I would invite you now to bring your attention to your breathing. Simply taking a breath in and out. Just being aware of the physical sensations in your body as you're breathing in and breathing out. And then the last step of this exercise is to expand your awareness now and include your body as a whole. Just being aware again of the posture of your body. Aware of your facial expression. We hold a lot of tension in our face and in muscles of our face. So see if you can maybe soften a little bit. And then again, aware of your breathing. And just embracing all the thoughts, the emotions, the experiences that you're having right now. And remembering that at any point during the day or even during this presentation that you feel scattered, you can always come back to the body and to the breath as a fresh start. And as we are at the end of this practice, I would invite you to open your eyes if they were closed. Stretch your body as you feel like you may need to stretch the body and move. And I would love to see how was this practice for people. Maybe people can put something in the chat. I see some hearts flying up. How was this experience for people? Pretty good. Calming, thank you. And again, some of these practices may not be positive, right? We may have more of a hard time, and that's also okay. The whole point of practicing mindfulness is really to bring our attention here, which is really a fundamental tool when we think about stress, right? Because awareness, as we will see later, is a huge piece of us being able to take care and take those steps that we need towards ourselves. I realized I had to soften my face. Yes, I also often realize that when we bring the attention to the muscles of the face. That's great. Thank you so much for this great participation. Okay, and so now that we feel hopefully a little bit more grounded and more present, I will start with the actual presentation. And so we do have an ambitious agenda. So sometimes I may go a little faster, then I will slow down. We'll have time for discussions. But I would really like to dedicate the first part of this presentation on the definition of what is really secondary traumatic stress, what is burnout, what is the definition of some related terms, so that we can start to make sense of what these concepts actually are. We'll talk about signs and symptoms, even though they might be very different from one person to another. And then the second part of this presentation, I would like to talk about practical strategies, right? Now that we understand the concepts, what can we do again to take that care of ourselves, whether we call it well-being, self-awareness, and we'll share some tools around self-awareness, which we already started with, sense of connectedness and regulation. And there is also a couple of cases actually, that we will bring so that these concepts and tools can feel even more real. In terms of the learning objectives, hopefully we'll be able to identify what are some main signs and symptoms of burnout and secondary traumatic stress. We'll talk about the physiology behind, which is actually similar to when we talk about trauma. And we'll talk about the new response to stress, which I will not share now. I will not release now, but we'll talk about it later. And then we will hopefully be able to identify some strategies to manage those symptoms. Now, I really also like to start with this definition of self-care or well-being or self-awareness, and just remind ourselves that really true self-care, it's not about just bubble baths and rose petals and things like that, which are wonderful. But it's more about making the choice to build a life that you don't need to escape from. And I think that there is really a lot of wisdom in this very simple definition, right? That self-care is really, again, about that balance and a choice to create indeed a life that we don't need to escape from. So again, I hope that this time together can bring those reflections and action steps for this. Now, we talk a lot about self-care, but let's see also the definition in another way of self-care, in a little more of a practical way, which will guide our presentation together. And when we think about self-care, again, it's more of an intentional practice. I was once presenting this to another group of people, and one person stood up and said, for me, self-care is really about actually discipline, and it may sometimes not feel like the thing that I want to do. But it's really that intentional action and practices, and it involves two main steps. Number one is recognizing what do we need right now. So some of you said, I just realized that my face was really tense, or maybe I realized I'm really tired, or I'm really thirsty, right? And then the second step is taking action, right? What can I do to meet those needs that I'm now aware of? And so there are different ways of the different aspects of self-care and well-being. We know the emotional piece, right, which might be met with journaling, mindfulness, therapy, spending time with supportive people. There is the social self-care, which is mirrored in healthy relationships, seeking help from others, or sometimes providing help to other people. And then there is a spiritual place that people can practice in many different ways according to their beliefs and practices. And then the physical one, which is actually the very basic one that we usually start with. And I also want to acknowledge as a first-time mom of a very young child, actually, that self-care will feel very different in different stages of our lives, right? So for me right now, self-care is really about making sure that I sleep 8 hours, right? It's just as basic as this is, right? And sometimes we may not actually be able to engage in many different self-care activities according to where we are in our lives. And so I'm just saying this so that you don't beat yourself up, but that you're simply aware and doing what you need to do in the moment and stage of your life where you are at. At the same time, it's not so easy to take care of ourselves, right? And practice these practices of well-being. And this is because we also have our internal barriers, right? Sometimes we may feel that sense of guilt and need of self-sacrifice, right? Thinking that if I take care of myself, or if I take this 3-week vacation, right? This is really selfish, or I should be spending more time helping others. Sometimes we might struggle more with the sense of perfectionism and high expectations, right? Definitely my Bulgarian culture shares some of those, or family culture, right? I need to achieve more before I can take a break, or I don't really feel good taking a break if I didn't finish everything on my list. Sometimes we minimize our needs, right? We may tell ourselves, well, some other people have it worse. I can't really complain. I just have to push through. We might be afraid of judgment. People might think I'm weak for asking help. Some people actually want to avoid to be with themselves because sometimes it may be really uncomfortable to take those moments of pause and reconnect to ourselves, right? It may feel really uncomfortable. And then we have the time and productivity pressures and cultural and societal conditioning, which we talked about. And so here I will be actually curious to hear, and Jane is really kind to make all these poll questions for us. But I would like us to reflect on what are your internal barriers, right? If you think about those themes of maybe feeling guilty, or being perfectionist, or maybe living in a culture where there is a lot of conditioning, what might be your barriers? And I believe you can click, or Jane, are they able to click on this, or there is another way?
Yeah, they should be able to
Okay,
answer the
perfect.
question. Yes.
Perfect. Yes, I just saw that host and panelists can vote, so great.
We have lots of responses. We'll give it just a minute.
Thank you.
And just a note for our audience, you are able to select more than one answer.
That is a good point. And there is also other. If you have other barriers, you can always put something in the chat if you prefer. Yeah, need to prove to self and others that you don't need it. Yes, that is deep what you said, Laura. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jane, for these. These are the results. So it sounds like time and productivity pressure is the winner, followed by perfectionism and high expectations, and then guilt and self-sacrifice. And we also see really a little bit of everything: minimization of needs, fear of judgment, avoidance, cultural and suicidal conditioning. So thank you just for this first sort of picture, emotional baggage and negative self-perception, right? Sometimes we may feel the need to prove ourselves through our work or other things that we're doing. All being immersed of doing for others, and you forget you're being, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And again, this is all about practicing our own self-awareness, right? And these are beliefs that are sometimes deeply ingrained in us, and we may not be able to solve right away, but being aware of that, it's really important. Thank you. Now, moving us along, why do we need to talk about secondary traumatic stress and burnout? And when I started this presentation, I really acknowledged the universal challenges that we are now sharing all over the globe with the insecurity and instability and human suffering all the time and all these different things. But there could be also some specific things that may make your sense of burnout or secondary traumatization higher, or your levels of stress simply higher. And so we have another poll question here. We promise you will not ask you so often every other slide, but these just happen to be right away so that we can get a sense of who is here in our Zoom. But if you can answer, what are your top sources of stress in your current role? And here you can see some options of heavy caseload, high work demands, lack of funding and job insecurity, challenging workplace dynamics like microaggressions, poor supervision, emotionally taxing or complex client situations. So feel free again to let us know. And again, this is anonymous, so it will be great to get a sense of where people are. And again, if you have anything else that you want to add, thank you. Colleagues' lack of alignment to practice standards, work ethics. Yes. Personal life stressors. And we'll see now the results. Okay, so it sounds like we have personal life stressors and high work demands and unrealistic expectations together with emotionally taxing or complex client situations and high work demands, right? So we do have a lot of personal life stressors, which is really not surprising. And it's been a challenging period of time for many, many people. And so there is nothing wrong to take a break, to take a pause. But there it sounds like the personal piece with the professional part of having a lot of work demands and dealing with clients that are more complex and emotionally taxing are some of the main issues. Entitled colleagues. What's your answer, Zlatina? Oh, I like this question. I think my answer is exactly what it's reflected here. I think both sometimes personal stress and I would say the lack of funding and job insecurity right now here in academic places. It's been really, really stressful. So maybe that's my number one question. Burden of the stories we're exposed to when living in a country where there are so many needs and such poor solutions and support. The lack of priority society in general gives children and the implications of that for my organization. Things that should be simple and not brainers have ridiculous barriers. Yes. Often have no adequate resources available to refer clients. Yes. And this can really lead us to moral distress and the unpredictable nature of the job challenges. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing with us all these challenges. And I'm sure that this list can be much longer and much more nuanced for each of us. But again, important to simply be aware what is really stressful right now. Now, back to why do we talk about secondary traumatic stress and burnout? Again, I will not talk too much about the statistics, but here you can see that according to many recent articles in the last years, we see that 97.8% of social workers indicated their client population experienced trauma. So basically almost all of you, if you're a social worker, are dealing with clients with trauma. And 50% of child welfare workers are at high risk of secondary traumatic stress. And the statistics to other child serving professionals like psychotherapists, US physicians are at high levels of burnout are also very, very similar. And we know that the predictors of secondary traumatic stress and burnout are related to the work settings, and you already indicated some of those predictors of high demands, difficult dynamics, lack of funding, but also clients factors, as we said, very complex cases right now, and personal factors. So I think that the previous poll really captured what the data is showing about what are the predictors of secondary traumatic stress and burnout. Now, other predictive factors among professionals, here you can see some factors such as, for example, mental health and trauma history. While we might be more empathetic or understanding of our clients with trauma if we had our own trauma, that sometimes can be more difficult for us because managing clients with certain personal traumas can trigger our own past experiences, right? And so we do also need to have the right support and the right way for us to process and be aware of our personal experiences and how our clients sometimes can be a reminder. The psychological distress, again, we talked about that. Sense of competence. The more sense of competence we have, the lower our burnout will be. And so attending trainings, right? Being knowledgeable or having the right supervision, it's really important. Coping style, some of us are more extrovert and may more lean and seek help from others, but others might be more shut down. Others may deal in different ways, right? And that will have an impact as well. There's some interesting statistics around race, and those statistics that were actually saying that white Caucasian people may suffer burnout and secondary traumatic stress more, just because sometimes in our culture, there is less of that social connection that might be typical for other cultures. Age, here we have mixed results. While a lot of the literature is saying that being a young professional can be really stressful because we lack those competencies, skills, and experience, there is also another research showing that if you have more than 12 years, that was particularly for psychotherapists, 12 years of experience, that can lead to significant burnout. Educational level, the more we are educated, the more likely we are to suffer burnout, because the more we are educated, more complex cases or more complexities we may need to manage in our work. And then for those of you who are parents, it's a good news because actually being a parent can be a big buffering against stress. And again, the protective factors are similar to the risk factors, right? Having the right support in your family, maybe being able to go back home and process your day with your partner, being committed to your self-care. Professional factors, there was one study interviewing different employees, and they were saying just knowing that your supervisor or management knew the work, that work had impacts on us was huge, right? So just knowing that your supervisors and leadership is actually aware of this can make a real difference. And then peer support, right? We all need to feel supported and connected. And I think that even a webinar like this, even though we can't see each other and really talk much, can give that sense of connectedness and support. And we also know that the consequences of burnout and secondary traumatic stress can be really huge, both on our physical and mental health. Now, let's quickly talk a little bit about the definitions of secondary traumatic stress and related terms. Now, when we talk about secondary traumatic stress, it's really about that emotional distress when we are hearing or reading or seeing the trauma of someone else, right? So it's that secondary exposure to trauma. So it could be you reading clinical notes about the client or reading a health record about the client, or you are talking to a client and they're telling you their story, right? And that can actually bring symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder that can range from mild to severe. And when we talk about burnout, again, there are a lot of definitions, but burnout can be typical for people who don't necessarily work with others. You may work in a bank and still deal with burnout. But when we look about the caring professions, there was again one study that was interviewing a psychologist who stopped working after 30 years of practice, and he or she said, I just began to stop caring about my clients. So sometimes those signs of burnout could be related to us and a sense of inability, right, to have that same empathy or compassion or energy when we take care of our clients, and we don't want to get there. Now, there are a lot of related terms as well. It's not just about secondary traumatic stress and burnout. We talk about direct exposure, those of you working in inpatient settings or any other settings where you may be directly exposed to clients self-harming, attempting suicide, right? This can have a significant impact on your mental health. Vicarious traumatization, when we talk about vicarious traumatization, is more about those changes in our own beliefs about the others or ourselves. So let's say if I am dealing with clients who are victims of sexual abuse in the house, I may start believing that caregivers are not good, or I might be afraid of leaving my child somewhere else with someone else, or even in a daycare center, right? So it's that impact of our own perceptions and beliefs. Compassion fatigue is a term that we use to explain that sense of physical and emotional exhaustion. And maybe we all experienced that when we were really listening to all these difficult stories of people, and then at some point we just don't have any more the energy within us. And moral distress is something that I think probably all of us had experienced at some point. And this is the belief about what you think is best for a certain individual or client. But because of organizational, institutional barriers, you can't do that. And so that is actually causing a lot of moral distress. Maybe you know the best practice for this person. And someone in the chat was saying that there is no funding to refer clients to specific practices and services, right? So that can bring us the moral distress. Or maybe we're intersecting with other systems, child welfare system, medical, school, and somewhere along the lines that can cause some moral distress. Now, it's not all bad. There is something that we call compassion satisfaction, actually, and compassion satisfaction is that sense coming from the positive aspects of our work, right? When you are doing your work and you receive that email, or you are seeing real changes in the life of the children and families that you're taking care of, or maybe a colleague of you is coming and thanking you for making space for them, right? And we know that compassion satisfaction can really buffer secondary traumatic stress and burnout. And I will pause here for a second and see, what do people think about these terms? Can you relate to this? What is this bringing up to you? I see vicarious traumatization. Absolutely. There is a question about generational trauma. Absolutely. That's a really important piece. And I think we see a lot of the generational trauma in our clients. And we may have also our generational trauma. So definitely that could be a big piece. Post-traumatic growth is also a positive outcome. Absolutely. And this is where we want to go with this webinar, post-traumatic growth, right? This experience of growing and making sense of our negative experiences. Sleep patterns were getting consistently disrupted and felt restless, not disconnecting from the work once home, right? So that difficulty in having boundary from work to home. Job created a big struggle for my work and home life balance. Absolutely. Great. So people are already sharing even some symptoms, which we will get into a second into that. Thank you so much. And when we talk indeed about signs and symptoms, this is what we can see. And again, this is not the formula for all of us. Again, I'll be curious to hear more from you. But when we talk about secondary traumatic stress and burnout, sometimes we may experience a sense of hopelessness, right? No matter what I do, nothing will ever change. Inability to embrace complexity. We know when we are rested, when we are not stressed, even when we're asked to do something more difficult or challenging, we embrace complexity, we'll take initiative. But if we are already stressed out, any type of an additional task can feel really stressful. Sometimes we may want to not listen to our clients or even avoiding certain clients. Sometimes we may experience anger and cynicism. The sleep issues, definitely, I am a person that I need my sleep. And if I can't sleep well, that's a clear sign for me that there is something going on. Sometimes we may feel the burnout and secondary traumatic stress in our bodies. We can have some somatic experiences of headaches or stomach aches or this sense of exhaustion, fatigue. Some of us might minimize, right? It's not a big deal, right? Worse things can happen, but at the same time, you are dealing with a lot of things. We may feel guilty. I should have saved this client. I should have done more in my job. And then the last four symptoms that you're seeing on the bottom are really related to even post-traumatic stress disorder, right? The preoccupation, intrusive thoughts with client stories. Sometimes we may feel really isolated, especially if you don't communicate with other professionals similar like you. You may feel like at home they don't really get it, or people don't really understand what am I really dealing with. Or feeling trapped and infected by trauma. Now I'm seeing also more in the chat here. Energy depleted. Compassion satisfaction is helping me through my research work, but I worry it is about external validation perpetuating a cycle of weak self-worth. Oh, Shiana, that is a deep thought. Yes, I see your point, and at the same time, I think that there is something important in our ability to help people, and I will talk about actually a research that I did on compassion satisfaction just in a minute. That is great. Perfect. Now, before talking about what can we do, I also wanted to spend a couple of minutes on the physiology of stress and burnout, right? Before prescribing any prescriptions, we want to understand what is actually happening in our body. And when we think about stress, work-related, personal stress, what is happening in our body, it's really similar to what we talk about when we talk about trauma, right? We know that there is the fight, flight, and freeze response. But actually, a new thing that I will teach you is that there is a fourth response to trauma and stress, which is the affiliate response. And the affiliate response is very different, and it engages different brain networks. And the affiliate response is basically related to oxytocin. The affiliate response is essentially our ability to look around when we're stressed, when we are even in a dangerous situation, and identify who are the safe people around us who can help us and how can we ask help for them, right? So it's about trust, it's about asking for help and identifying safe people. And all this is based on the theory and research on biological connection, right? That connection is a biological need to survive. And so the affiliate response, it's really important piece when we talk about stress. However, if you're working in a work setting where your colleagues are more stressed than you, or as it was with COVID, or some of us are still working primarily from home, maybe feeling more isolated, maybe our partners or our supervisors are also completely burned out, then what happens is that this affiliate response gets blocked, because if I look around and there is no one to help me, I can't really rely on anyone. And what happens is that we go back to the fight, flight, and freeze response, right? So we may go back into some coping styles of being shut down or being more irritable, or maybe using other things, right, that may not be really so healthy for us, which can be impactful. And so the goal of our time together is really to understand, how can we foster that affiliate response? How can we go back when we're stressed from the fight, flight, and freeze into the affiliate? And when we talk about stress, the Harvard Center for Developing Child made a really nice description of different types of stress, right? So positive stress is maybe the stress that I'm experiencing right now. Before joining this webinar, I was excited, right? And even though it might be a little bit stressful, ultimately it's a positive experience for me and hopefully for you. Tolerable stress is that temporary activation of your internal alarm system, but it's buffered by supportive relationships, right? So maybe you are changing your job, or maybe you lost someone, right? But you have other people around you who are helping you. Stress becomes toxic when there is a prolonged activation of our stress response, right? So we're chronically not sleeping well, not having really time for ourselves, chronically dealing with all these stressors at work. And there is an absence of protective relationships, right? So really what makes a stress toxic, it's not just the stress itself, but whether or not we have those protective relationships, whether or not we have those other people in our work settings and home that can help us to process and make sense of what is happening. Another quote that I really like from our center is that it's not about just summing the suffering, but building the buffering, right? And so when we talk about self-care, the question is more about, how can I build that buffering? How can I build those promotive and protective factors in my life that can help me deal with certain circumstances that we may not have control over? And now, to answer this question, we will get into the second part of our presentation, which is about some strategies to address secondary traumatic stress and burnout. And something that I really want to acknowledge is that addressing secondary traumatic stress and burnout is not only on an individual level. And even though today we will talk more about strategies at an individual level, it's really about also an organizational level approach, right? And so if we only focus on coping strategies, go do mindfulness or take a vacation or meet more friends, we're basically implying that the individuals experiencing secondary traumatic stress are at fault, right? And so it's really important to think about also at an organizational level, for those of you who are leaders or supervisors, how can you make that cultural shift? How can you maybe embody more policies around secondary traumatic stress and burnout that can make individuals feel differently about their work situation? Now, to make this more real, we brought up a case, and the case is the case of Alex. I'm just gonna check the chat, and Jane, let me know if I'm missing anything. I see here some very nice comments of being trauma-informed, shared stress, polyvagal theory. Absolutely. Now let's meet Alex. This is just a case that will help us to conceptualize some of this understanding, and I'll just briefly read the case. Alex is a 25-year-old woman originally from Puerto Rico who works full-time at a human service agency where she's been employed for 1 year. She has a full caseload of children who have experienced trauma. Alex works primarily with families who are recent immigrants to the US, many of whom had traumatic experiences before, during, and after immigrating. She's bilingual in Spanish and English, with Spanish as her first language. Alex is the only Latinx, bicultural, bilingual staff member in her program, and she gets most of the agency referrals for Spanish-speaking children and families resulting in a higher caseload compared to her coworkers because of the great number of monolingual Spanish families in the agency service population. Many of these families experience substance use and violence at home. Alex is also asked to help translate for coworkers and to translate agency materials into Spanish. This work is very demanding and she works long hours. Alex often feels isolated in her work and experiences discrimination and microaggressions from colleagues, such as comments and inappropriate jokes involving stereotypes about Latinx culture, people with low English fluency, or accented English and immigration. Alex is also often irritable at work, and she feels that she's failing at her job. Alex's supervisor, Kelly, notices that Alex seems exhausted and that she has called in sick more than usual, but she isn't sure how to bring this up. Now, let's put in the chat, what are some organizational stressors that could be contributing to Alex's experience of burnout? And I can put these slides again back up so that people can see that. But if you think of someone like Alex, what might be some organizational factors impacting her? Overload of work and expectations, being the only staff available for translation, one with bilingual, larger caseload, understaffing, long hours, limited resources, alone with cases, isolation, absolutely. Absolutely, lack of psychological safety, disorganized work patterns, toxic colleagues. Yes, yes.
Zlatina, there was one about workplace racism.
Workplace racism. Thank you, Jane, for bringing this up. No colleagues. Yes, I think that you identified much more than what is here on this slide. Not enough support from her supervisor, right? Sometimes our supervisors might notice certain things, but they may not know how to bring this up. Definitely. Now, let's see a little bit more about Alex's personal history. So we know that Alex immigrated in the US with her family when she was 8. Her mother and father speak very little English, and she's been taking care of them economically. The family is experiencing high levels of stress given their immigration status. Her father suffered substance abuse and she witnessed domestic violence when she was younger. But after the family relocated in the US, they joined a local church and her father stopped using substances. Currently, she's experiencing intrusive thoughts when working with families who specifically have SUD and DV issues, and she has sleep difficulties, feels exhausted all the time, and she doesn't see the point of working. However, the family relies on her income and she needs her health insurance. Now, knowing this personal piece, what do you think might be other risk factors that are impacting Alex? What can we think here? She has no choice, unresolved personal issues, definitely, right? So she had a past in which she witnessed substance use from that and domestic violence. And now she's dealing with similar clients. Re-traumatization, PTSD, triggers, definitely. Family pressure to provide, right? And we can see this with a lot of, for example, second generation living in the US or anywhere else, multiple burden, ACEs, definitely. And again, we can see here how much everything is coming together, right? It's not just about the heavy workloads, but it's also about the colleagues and lack of support in the workplace, lack of support at home, combined with personal history. She relieves her own history with her clients. While that makes her great to understand, it can prevent her from healing from her own trauma. Yes, absolutely, definitely. And again, when we think about Alex, who could be us, any of us here, we can go back again into the main factors that can put people at risk. And so we know for someone like Alex, the high workload, working clock hours, microaggression, the type of clients that she's dealing with, and the personal factors of her having her own maybe unprocessed or unhealed past trauma. Now let's talk again, what can we do, right? So how can we help someone like Alex in that situation? And I would like to talk about three main concepts when we talk about well-being and self-care. And those are self-awareness, as I said earlier, a sense of connectedness. How can we build those safe, nurturing relationships at our workplace and outside of work? And then what are some regulation techniques that we can use right in the moment when we feel really triggered or stressed? And so self-awareness, when we talk about self-awareness and when we look in the literature, self-awareness is really our ability to be aware and tap into the sense of awareness of what is happening inside of us, as we did with our meditation, and what is happening outside of us. Am I aware of the lights coming outside, of the colors, of the noises, of the temperature? And we know from a lot of research that if we live our lives on an autopilot, right, our levels of stress and anxiety and depression go really up. And so again, one way to practice self-awareness is with mindfulness techniques. If we look at the definition of mindfulness, according to Jon Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness is really about paying attention in a particular way. We want to pay attention on purpose, intentionally, in the present moment. So we're not paying attention what happened in the past or worried about the future, but in the present moment. And we try to pay attention in a way that it's non-judgmental, right? Sometimes we want to push away our emotions or experiences, which causes more suffering. But if we embrace our experience, if we are aware of what am I feeling right now, you can see that the pain can actually alleviate. And really what we do when we practice mindfulness, but it could be any other practice that brings you more awareness, listening to music, drawing, doing a hobby, being in the nature, right? We're creating a space. We're creating a space between some triggering event, that it could be a thought, could be a situation at work, and an action, right? And so we're building that space that we can then respond in a way that is more skillful. Again, there are many mindfulness practices out there. This one is easy, called squared breathing, which basically consists of taking a deep breath and counting to 4, then stop, holding the breath, counting to 4, and then breathing out and counting to 4. For me, 4 is a little too long, so you could do 3, you could do 2, you could do 5. But it's, again, the whole point is bringing awareness. Body scan meditation. These slides will be shared, so you will have all these links where you can listen to meditations on body scan, right? And we can also use the technique of mindful listening when we are in our work settings. So for example, if you think of a situation of this one, let's say you're at your desk catching up on documentation when your colleague Sam knocks lightly and walks in. They sit down without much eye contact and they say, "I'm fine, just a rough day," while rubbing their forehead and keeping their voice unusually flat. What would you do if you're in a situation like that? What would you do about your colleague Sam? What are you noticing? And how would you approach mindfully a situation like this? Minimizing, yes, good point, Courtney. Ask questions about their day, body language, something is wrong based on body language. Yes, definitely, right? So we're aware that there is almost a disconnection between what they say, but how they actually look. What's going on? Yeah. And so if we use our mindfulness skills into a situation like that, we want to first mindfully listen, right? So we want to keep our focus on the emotional experience of the person. We're able, with our limbic system and through our nonverbal behaviors and signs and signals, to catch that that this person actually looks really depleted or sad or withdrawn, right? Even though they're saying they're fine. And so something we can say is, I hear you're fine, but I'm noticing you're looking down and you're sad and your voice is sounding different or a bit tired. Would you like to share what is going on, right? So in this way already, you are shifting the focus from what they're saying or the situation or a solution into their affect. What are you actually experiencing? And then we want to be able to wait and hold space to tolerate silence. Sometimes people need some time to process and speak. And again, we want to ask more emotion-focused questions, right? To normalize the feelings. That sounds really intense. It makes so much sense that you're feeling that way, right? And again, I'm seeing in the chat, appreciating them, recognizing something different, tell them, giving constructive feedback. Absolutely. Yes. All great, great answers. Now, me and Jane are going to put a little funny test here in the chat. Jane, feel free to put this in the chat. But this is a little test on how self-aware are you. It's a test on emotional intelligence that you can do online. It's a really very quick one. And it's not again, a diagnostic tool or anything like this. It's just for fun. But it gives you a score. It gives you a little bit of a description of your own self-awareness and where are you with that. Jane, if you're there, feel free to put this link in the chat.
Sorry, Zlatina, I'm pulling it up now. That wouldn't open for me. So it'll be there in one moment, everyone.
No worries. And again, unfortunately, we'll not have the time to do it here, but feel free to do it during this webinar or later when we're done. But it's just a nice thank you. Thank you so much. And other people also found it, so that is great. Now, other ways of practicing self-awareness, there are a lot of apps. One of my favorite is the 10% Happier, but also Calm and Mindfulness are really great. These are some resources. Tara Brach is really good in self-care, and many others, obviously, but they're just some reliable sources and centers where you can download meditations or enroll into their mindfulness courses. Now, many of you probably have heard of this theory of the window of tolerance, and the whole point is that we all have our internal window of tolerance, which is basically that space inside of us when we feel good. For me, this is when I'm well rested, things are safe and fine. However, stress can really shrink that window of tolerance and can send us either in a hyperarousal mode. So some of us, when they're stressed, they're more anxious or irritable or jumpy, hypervigilant, or others may shut down and go into this hypoarousal. And so it's really important for us to be aware of how do we look under stress, right? What are our signs and symptoms? How our emotional thermometer goes up and down? And then think, what are some strategies that I need right now? If I'm really irritable, I may need some down regulation strategy, right? Maybe listening to a music or maybe meditating, right? But if I'm really shut down and fatigued, maybe I need to take some proactive action of maybe exercise, behavioral activation, communicating, reaching out to people. This is an action plan from the University of Kentucky, who are the real leaders in this work. But another poll question here for us is to reflect on how do you look under stress? And again, Jane will put this poll question about some signs and symptoms that you may have, and it might be interesting to see what do people experience the most. Crying. And again, this list may not capture everything, but struggle to concentrate or stay organized, absolutely. One of the first things that are going away is our ability to pay attention. Ignore it and then feel the anxiety at night. Yes. And a lot of people are agreeing with that. Become more efficient and task-oriented, but irritable. Yeah. Yes, you can choose more than one, actually. Okay, so irritability is the winner here. So please excuse any of us if we're irritable. Actually, something deeper can be going on. Keep pushing through, ignore the signs. Withdraw, feel physically exhausted, struggle to concentrate, become hyper focused, overly controlling. I become much more catastrophizing, yeah, ruminating much more, and then other. Thank you. And again, this could be very personal. I really appreciate you all being vulnerable and sharing this, but we're just practicing this self-awareness. And also, I also want to mention that we are all different, right? And as I said, some of us can be really irritable, and some of us may need space when we're stressed. Others may need to actually talk it through right away. Others may need more support, right? And so just being mindful about the fact that maybe you are someone who really likes to offer support, but your colleague may need some time before that. And so honoring the needs of the other person, and reflecting on what do you personally need in that moment. Some people just need to be distracted or find humor in the situation. Others may need, more supervision or peer support. And another way to practice this self-awareness is actually through ProQual. This is the Professional Quality of Life questionnaire that Jane will put in the chat here. Again, we don't have the time, unfortunately, to take this test here, but this is a validated measure that it's able to measure your levels of secondary traumatic stress, burnout, and compassion satisfaction, and that it gives you a score of where you are. Again, none of these things is a diagnostic tool, and you may take this test now and then in 3 months from now, and it will be completely different, but it can give you just a picture of where you are. The same organization, the same tool of professional quality of life, is also available for at an organizational level, and it can be downloaded for free in the link that you're seeing here. And there are also a lot of resources on the National Child Traumatic Stress Network on how can we implement trauma-informed care in our supervision and in our work. The Provider Resilience app contains all those ProQual and also other questionnaire. And so there are also alternative ways. When we think about connectedness, it's really about thinking, how can we provide reflective supervision, right? It's really important to have supervisors that are not only teaching us the tricks and tips of how to work best with clients, but that can also make space of what's going on for you when you're working with this client, what's going on for you when you're dealing with this patient. And again, you can download all these resources. Talking about compassion satisfaction, I was also part of a very interesting project in Ukraine where we trained over 100 Ukrainian psychologists during the war in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And in our results, it was very surprising because we looked at the professional quality of life of those people. But really, contrary of what we were expecting, what we saw was that those professionals, instead of having high levels of burnout and secondary traumatization, which is what we were thinking, they actually had very high levels of compassion satisfaction, which was really remarkable. And when I was talking to some of them during my supervision time, there was this one woman, this is a quote from one of the Ukrainian psychologists who was trained in TFCBT. She said, when you are in the midst of the war, you're more resilient, actually. And at the beginning of the war, I was intentionally finding ways to help. It was important to have this sense of belonging. It definitely gives you wings if you're able to help people. And trainings like this is exactly what helps us. And so this has been one of the most rewarding projects I've ever participated in, because it was really remarkable to see how people, even in the midst of a war, if they're able to actually help those children and learn new ways to help, can lower down their levels of burnout and secondary traumatic stress. This is a nice, very nice activity that you can do in a group setting of affirmation circle, where you take a little index card, you write your name, and you pass it around your colleagues who write something nice about you. And you do this for everyone. It's better for an in-person training, so I apologize that we can't do that, but I'm just giving you ideas. And sometimes we also want to use some positive mantras, right? Saying something like, I am enough. I know how to overcome obstacles. Things will get better. I'm worthy of happiness. Initially, we thought to do these on Padlet, but I'm afraid that we will run out of time. So I would invite people to put in the chat, what are some of the things that you take yourself, that you tell yourself when you're going through stress? I always find a lot of strength into these little positive self-talks that we tell ourselves when we're going through stress. Feel free to put it in the chat. You did well. This shall pass. Oh, I say I love you. I love that. Wow. Serenity prayer. This too shall pass. I've got this. Yes, I'm teaching this to my 3-year-old daughter who is already saying this. I've got this, Mom. Be strong. You did your best. Well done. This too shall pass. Yes. Take one day at a time. It's okay not to be okay. I have limits. Yes, like everyone, you'll survive this. You are not alone. Yes, I love that. You're loved. What it's meant to be will be. Yes, believing that really what it's supposed to be, it will be.
Latina, did you see the one that said you're more important than your problem?
Oh, I
love
love that. Oh, wow. These are amazing. Thank you for give me peace, set me free. Those are beautiful. I think that on Padlet would have been great, but I'm just a little bit mindful of our time and I don't want to run out of time. Keep fighting. Thank you so much. I wish we can save all these. Those are great. Thank you. And these are some books that can encourage positive self-talk. Those are books that you can actually use with children. And again, this will be on your slides that you can download. Another important piece is to reflect on what type of support we need and who can provide it. Sometimes we tend to go to the same colleague about support, but sometimes we may end up feeling disappointed, right? And so it's important to stop and think, okay, right now in this moment, do I need emotional support? Do I just need to vent to someone and feel heard? Or I need an informational support, right? I need actually someone to problem solve with me, give me more information. Or maybe I need someone who give me tangible support, someone who can cover some shift for me or take a little bit more out of my plate. And so writing down the people that you can go to, who are the best people that I can connect in my work setting or outside of my work setting, to get those needs can be more efficient instead of just assuming that one person can give all this support. And I also like these questions sometimes to ask people when they come to us and vent, like in the little briefcase example with Sam, for example, or something like this. We may ask, do you need me to listen to you right now, or you need an advice? And I find this really helpful to sort of ask the person first, what is your need right now? And how can I help? Another ways of connectedness within the organization. Again, you don't have to have 2 hours to meditate or do or know or do big things, but if you have 2 minutes, you can smile or you can tell a joke to a coworker. If you have 10 minutes, maybe write down your thoughts. You can go and take coffee with someone, right? And then the last piece that I wanted to talk today is regulation and reflection, right? So what are some things that we can do to regulate ourselves and bring ourselves back into that window of tolerance? And I would say that regulation always starts from the basics. And I know that it can sound really basic to think about getting enough sleep, eating well. But again, if we are physically exhausted, it may be really difficult to think about some further needs or exploring yourself or doing much more. Maybe you just need to start from the very basics. And then when we think about regulation, they're usually top-down and bottom-up strategies, right? So top-down strategies are more cognitive strategies. For those of you who are doing clinical work, you will know about, right, changing our thoughts, being aware of our thoughts. And then bottom-up strategies are those that are starting from the body, like regulating my body with mindfulness, with music, with physical exercise. And most of the times when we are dysregulated, when we are in that red zone, we may need to start with the body and start with that bottom-up strategies. And this is one of my favorite quotes from mindfulness, saying that every thought is a mental event that contains a seed of reality surrounded by a shell of inference. In other words, thoughts are not facts, and sometimes we may end up feeling in the way that we think. But being able to detach from our thoughts sometimes can be really helpful. Remembering your whys, we have a personal reason why we chose to do what we do, right? All of us here, all of you here in this virtual space, you have a deeper reason why you're doing what you're doing. And I think connecting to those roots and thinking, why do I do this? And what do I really want to do? Can really guide us, and really following who we are and what's the purpose of what we're doing is really important. And now in the last 2 minutes of our time together, I would actually put the Padlet out so that we can practice this. But I want us to think about how can we commit. Today is June 25th. I want us to reflect on what is your personal reason to practice self-care, and what might be one self-care activity that you can do in the next week or so, every single day, that can help you to bring more of that balance. And so Jane, if you can put this Padlet link, I will connect us to that because I think it might be a nice way to end. And I will explain you how this works.
So Zlatina, are you putting the link in the chat?
Oh, I will put the link in the chat, sure.
Sorry, I don't need it.
Yeah, that's better. Okay, so I will put the link in the chat here, and I would invite you to click on the link, which will take you to a little purple board called Padlet. And here you can see the question. So the question is about your commitment plan and what self-care practice are you committing after today to practice. So when you connect to the link, if you click here on the lower right bottom icon, when you see this plus here, you will see a little window that says subject, and you can type anything that you would like, and it will be a little board. It could be anonymous if you want to change your name. So feel free to do that.
The system will give you kind of a funny name. You'll see a box pop up. You can keep that and just hit done, or you can put your own name in. I actually love the names. Excited Hummingbird, Cheerful Penguin, Radiant Reindeer. And so, Tina, they can post multiple things, correct?
Say again?
They can post multiple answers.
Yes, absolutely. You can post answers. You can, and I see someone already putting a little picture. I love that. Walks, either before, during work, sleep well, connections with nature, go outside, maybe travel even, right? For those of us who are in the middle of the summer, hydration, yes. Yesterday here we're 37 degrees Celsius, so definitely hydration was very important. Deep breathing. I really love this. This is beautiful. So this is our commitment plan, and I think it's a beautiful way to end our time together. I know people have a lot to say, and we could really do this for 3 more hours. I just love this space, and I want to thank all of you for the incredible work that you're doing, for the time that you have given us in this past couple of hours. And I would like to thank Jane and Holly and Pragati, everyone behind the curtains, for making this possible and for inviting me. So thank you all.
And we want to offer a heartfelt thank you to you, Zlatina. I told you at the beginning, you're like a warm cup of coffee in our lives. And I'm based on the reactions and the comments in chat, I know you shared that love to everyone here. And again, to our professionals out there, this is what this campaign's about. This is why we tap on Zlatina, every July to share her wisdom and knowledge for us. We appreciate your candor and your honesty, and again, your willingness to share your personal struggles. It's really been a beautiful 90 minutes. And Zlatina, again, we can't thank you enough. There are a few things I just want to let you know that, in case you missed it in the chat, we will send a link to the recording. We will send Zlatina's presentation slides will also be on that page. And I'll try to remove as many links as I can from your slides and put them actually as live links on the page. But if I miss anything, know that you have URLs in Zlatina's slides, so there shouldn't be any, whether it's references or supplementary resources that you wouldn't have access to. And then there's a brief survey as soon as we disconnect from Zoom, it'll pop up for you. We would love for you to share your feedback with Zlatina. We know how we feel about her. We know what you've said in chat, but again, it would just be a lovely way to kind of help us as we shape future webinars on this topic going forward. So, and I do want to just make one more note that we had almost 100 countries represented here today. We had over 48 disciplines. So you have spread your message through the world and through many child professionals who definitely needed it from all aspects of discipline. So again, thank you for that. The reach is broad. So
Thank you. This is such a rewarding time and space, and it is really my honor to be here and have these connections all over the world.
well, I hope everyone can now go and not jump into a stressful afternoon or morning or evening, and you can, hopefully just take this with you for the rest of the day and beyond. So good morning, good night, to good afternoon to everyone who joined us, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great day and night. Bye, everyone.